can't tell me that I'm the only person who, in between learning the same kanji for like the nth time because for some reason they just don't want to stay put in my head. You can't tell me that I'm the only person who uses anime sometimes as an excuse of learning Japanese. And I know it's an excuse because are we really learning that much through anime? Well, unless you want to sound like, I don't know, alcoholic samurai ninja pirate with existential crisis and sugar addiction. Or an ugly bastard from all the Okay, I'm kidding. You can actually learn a little bit of Japanese through anime. You just need to be careful. But you can also learn a little bit of Japanese culture through anime, and with that you need to be careful too, because then you go to Japan and every girl doesn't wear maid outfits and cut ears, and their uniforms are not that short, like in anime, and you get a bit disappointed. Anyways, anime can actually offer us a glimpse of different aspects of Japanese culture, and that's why in this video I want to talk about my favorite series through which you can actually learn something about Japan. Let's start with Sangatsu no Lion, or March Comes In Like a Lion. It's one of the series that I feel like didn't really get that popular, even though it absolutely deserves the recognition. It's a story about a young shogi player who is trying to navigate through his complicated life situation and through his relationship with the game, which became his career at some point. Rei is not your typical anime protagonist though. He is a soft-spoken, kind but introverted kid who went through a traumatic loss of his family, complicated relationship with his adoptive family, and became independent at only 17 years old. Sangatsu no Lion is a human drama. We follow Rei through his day-to-day life as a professional player of a game he's good at, but doesn't necessarily like. We watch him build new relationships and navigate through old ones. The story focuses a lot on his emotions, his loneliness and passion, and because of that we get to see a really well-structured character who feels like a real human. Rei's actions are never exaggerated. You understand why he's doing what he's doing, and the story never offers us a cookie-cutter solutions to any problems. Instead, we might get a bittersweet resolves to some, and some might not even get resolved at all. That and an array of real-life-like characters and beautiful, not generic watercolor art is a reason why I personally think this series is a gem which should be talked about more. It's sad at times, but nevertheless it's a feel-good anime. You get a sense of closeness with the characters, you get invested in their mundane lives, and to be honest, you would wrap in a blanket every single one of them. There are characters in opposition to our protagonist, characters which in other series could have been portrayed as villains, but Sangatsu no Lion never offers such a simplistic view on people. Even when someone's actions might seem negative, the story always tries to explain to us why someone behaves the way they do. Because just like in real life, nothing is black or white. And obviously the element of Japanese culture that you can learn about through this anime is shogi. It is one of the main topics of the story, but I wouldn't say it's the main one, the story just circles around it. Shogi is a Japanese type of chess game with history dating back to at least Heian period, and our main character is a professional player. At only 17 he can support himself with the money he gets from playing shogi, even though he claims he doesn't really like the game. Sangatsu no Lion offers a nice lesson about what the game really is, the rules and techniques, but also you get a glimpse of a world of shogi players. It shows Rei's life as a professional player, his matches and tournaments, and the way in which you can get higher ranks. But the anime also shows how complicated the relationship with someone's passion can be. Rei claims he doesn't like shogi, but he shows a real passion for it. The reason why he got into playing it would be a spoiler, so I'm not gonna talk about this, but his relationship with his profession is really interesting and I think quite universal for all people that at least once were passionate about something. So if you like human dramas and you actually want to learn something about shogi and shogi players, then that is not exaggerated and it's not on the verge of superpower series that some sports anime sometimes can be, then I would really recommend watching this hidden gem. And so, Rei is a cinnamon roll and he deserves everything in the world. Next anime is completely different and it would be a very good watch during long winter nights when you're looking for something spooky to watch. Ayakashi Japanese Classic Horror, or Ayakashi Samurai Horror Tales, is a series which compiles 3 different classic or classic-inspired ghost stories. And Japanese ghost stories actually have quite a long history in Japan, and the season for them is in the summer actually, not in the fall like in our culture, because apparently getting spooked helps with the horrible heat that's just unbearable in summer in Japan. And I don't know if that's actually true, but I've read somewhere that they just used ghost stories and getting spooked as a way to cool themselves in the summers back in the day. Maybe that's also why they do the courage tests in the summer in all the school animes that you can find. Also, they open like the ancestor holidays in the summer too, so maybe that's the reason why too. Huh. Anyways, the first story of Ayakashi is actually based on Tokaido Yotsuya Kaidan, which is a kabuki play written by Nanboku Tsuruya in 1825 and was first staged in then Edo, now Tokyo. Kabuki is a very interesting form of theater and I want to make a separate video on it at some point, but all you need to know about it now is that it is very expressive, dynamic and oftentimes colorful. It was designed to cater to the tastes of the lower classes of the Edo period society, so most of the stories are made to be very entertaining. Yotsuya Kaidan was one of the most popular shows at the time, and it became a classic of Japanese ghost stories. It tells the story of a turbulent romance, murder and revenge. It was adapted many times and it is still an influence on Japanese horrors today. The adaptation in Ayakashi is just one of many, but it's a very atmospheric one. You can experience the classic of Japanese storytelling through anime, without the form getting in the way of the quality. Sure, the art style might be a bit outdated, it is an anime from 2006 after all, but the dark tones and sinister music adds to the spookiness. If you're interested in the classics of Japanese literature, the story can give you a taste of it. Second story, Tenshu Monogatari, is also based on Japanese literature, not as classical as the previous one though. It was a play written in 1917 by Izumi Kyoka, who was a famous novelist and playwright, whose stories are still staged to this day. Tenshu Monogatari is one of his most well-known plays, and it tells a story of a forbidden love between human and a goddess. If I'm being honest, this part of the anime is my least favorite one. It's not bad, but it's not as gripping and unforgettable as the other two. The third story, however, is a cherry on top. Bakeneko is an original story by Nakamura Kenji, an anime movie director, and Yoko Michiko, a screenwriter. It is about a nameless medicine seller who helps solving a mysterious death of a bride of a wealthy family. It's an original story, but it's based off of old ghost stories, folk tales and historical dramas, stylized like a kabuki play with art based on ukiyo-e, Japanese woodcut paintings of Edo period. Art style of this story is completely different to the previous ones, and in my opinion it was an amazing idea to stylize it as if it was an ukiyo-e, because it gives off the atmosphere of the Edo period. The story itself was inspired by old folk tales of Japan, with added mystery and modernized a bit. It shows similarities with the first story, Yotsuya Kaidan, or Bancho Sarayashiki, another ghost story of the Edo period, showing clear influence of the Kaidan genre, which to this day is still pretty popular in Japanese media. If you're interested in Japanese ghost stories or you want to know the origins of Japanese horror movies today, then this series is a must-watch. And the last series I want to talk about is Gintama. What? No, I'm serious, Gintama is a superior anime and I'm gonna show you why. Yes, it is a shonen comedy anime, but throughout its long runtime, it actually portrayed quite a big chunk of Japanese history. Again, we are in Edo period, or around Meiji Restoration period here. Most characters in Gintama are actually based on real historical figures of Japan, with just slightly changed names. And yes, the story is ridiculous because it's Gintama, but if you actually get curious about what they're talking about in the show and look it up, then you can learn quite a bit about Japanese history through it. Gintoki himself is based on a folktale hero called Kintaro or Kintoki, a kid with superhuman strength who in turn was supposedly based on a real warrior from Heian period. Then we have an entire cast of Shinsengumi, which was an organization back in the Bakumatsu period, when the Bakufu, so the shogunate, started slowly falling apart. They were a kind of a police force in Kyoto whose job was to protect the shogunate representatives. And yes, in Gintama they are stationed in Edo, so Tokyo, not in Kyoto. Okita doesn't die of tuberculosis, instead his sister takes a hit, and Hijikata doesn't die in Hakodate, but it's an anime where American forces appearing in Japan are represented by aliens, so really, what did we expect? Takasugi and Katsura and their organizations, Kiheitai and Joishishi, were real opponents of Shinsengumi and the shogun as well. Speaking of the shogun, Shige, the poor guy tormented by seemingly everything and everyone in the anime, was supposedly based on Tokugawa Iemochi, who in real life also didn't have much luck as he had a poor health and died at the age of 20. Kabukicho was and still is a district in Tokyo, known for, well, it's an infamous entertainment district, let's call it that. Yoshiwara was also a real place, a red light district in Edo, now Tokyo, but obviously it doesn't exist anymore. But history is not the only thing that this series can teach you about Japan, and I told you that it's a superior anime, right? because it also offers a huge amount of reference to Japanese pop culture, starting with other anime and manga series through Japanese TV shows and dramas. It makes fun of manga and idol industries, Japanese customs and mindsets, and more or less current events in politics even. Basically anything that happens in Japan can become a joke in Gintama. Nothing is safe, and that's the beauty of it. As foreign viewers, we need to get into a mindset of anything can be a reference to something, even if we don't understand it straight away. Because this series was obviously created for Japanese people, some of the jokes and references might not be as easily understandable for foreign viewers as it is for Japanese people, and that's why I would say that if you're around, if you've watched around 100 anime at least, then Gintama just gets so much funnier. That's why I would never recommend it to anyone who, is not a weeb. If you're a connoisseur and you actually want to learn something about Japan in a little bit unconventional way and laugh at the jokes and references to anime culture and manga culture and maybe some current events, then take anything that you see in Gintama with a grain of salt and just have fun. Yes, these three animes are completely different things, completely different genres that cater to completely different tastes in anime. But they can all teach you something about Japanese culture that's different to make cafes, cute school uniforms, and running with a piece of bread in your mouth when you're late. So go watch some anime and tell yourself it's a form of education, so I don't feel alone in doing that.